Welcome to Watch Your Mouth,
where therapy meets culture.
where we're real, raw, and rooted in healing. I'm Dr. Monica, a licensed clinical professional counselor in the state of Illinois. I'm also the owner and founder of Pierce Counseling and Consulting Services. I'm an educator for a master's degree program in clinical mental health counseling. I'm a mom, a wife, and I'm a sister friend.
Hi, Cadmona Hall. I have a doctorate in marriage and family therapy, and I am licensed in the states of Illinois and New York. I am an educator as well. I teach in a master's and a doctoral program. I am a sister, a daughter. I'm recently a wife, which is, exciting. Yay. I see clients and consult and do all kinds of good trainings around grief and loss and social justice.
Okay, so where did the name Watch Your Mouth? Like, there's so many colloquialisms that could define Watch Your Mouth. I think for us, it really is about speaking power into truth.
It's a beautiful way to say it. I think we are committed to challenging our use of voice, of supporting ourselves and you in your own healing and your own development. And some of that's about reclaiming our language, reclaiming how we talk, and particularly since we're therapists, I want us to be curious about what are the things that we say to ourselves, and then how do we make sense of it?
I think what we really want to do is make sure we have a platform and a space to generate a change in language about how our communities see mental health, how they see and practice healing, the language that we use to define who we are in the spaces that we navigate.
Makes sense to me. I think it sounds great. I think that's the stuff that we talked about, right?
Yeah.
What do we want, and how do we generate a community where everyone is sort of pouring into the same well together? And so I think Watch Your Mouth has multiple meanings.
So when we talk about watching our mouths, what we're really talking about is changing the language around mental health and the way we view that, culture, and of course healing. Because it really is a podcast that speaks to a therapist, but also speaks to community around healing. I think we all need some of that.
Mm-hmm. And we want to keep it real, right? We want to talk to you as our therapeutic selves, but also as our regular Black woman selves. We are your sister friends, and so we want to break things down. We want to be honest, and we want to generate good conversations that help us heal and live well.
Because I think that's how it all started.
Absolutely.
With a conversation that we wanted to invite other people into, so that they could be part of the healing process. You can't do it alone.
No. And I think that's part of what made us decide, wait a minute. We each have different places, different platforms where we're able to do this work, where we're able to sort of offer ourselves. And what we do know is that, two is better than one. Being in a relationship is the best thing. And as friends, as sister friends, as folks that love each other, we really, how could we hoard this when we could share it with community, build together, and hopefully be blessed in the same ways that we hope to bless you all.
Wow. Thank you for that. We talked a little bit about the title and what the meaning and how we came to develop a podcast. I think along with us deciding that a podcast would help generate more information on a platform to more people, like involving them in our dialogue as part of our community, we really have to talk about like where this passion came from. Like, I'm on a mission to demystify mental health for Black folks, and I've been on this mission for a few years now. You may have encountered some of my Instagram posts, Therapy Thursday, where I answer questions that I got from clients, and thought, oh, this is good. Like, it was good. Mm-hmm. It wasn't just good because I was saying it was good. It was good. No, it was good. And then I thought,
to be a guest on Therapy.
You did.
It was great.
It was great. And then I thought there has to be more of a conversation. After our conversation, we even talked about we need to have more of these conversations. Right. Like, people could have and gain more from us having a dialogue than from me just answering a question.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And I think, multiple things are happening. One opportunity where we can talk about mental health, we can talk about, healing and what that looks like in therapy, but also outside of therapy. What does this mean for us as a culture, as a community? And what does this mean for us in our relationship, right? Like, how can we do this in a way that's fun? And again, how do we learn from you? How do you learn from us? And so our hope really is that we can have good conversations, that we can talk about the things that are happening in our lives, we can talk about the things that are happening in our world, and we can support each other in the process.
Yeah, and I think I know that I needed to have a space that included both who I was, but also talking about how therapy is part of a healing process. Because I recognize now more than ever that, I need a community. And I think through our friendship, which evolved over time, I recognize, oh my gosh, so many other people could, gain from this experience of us being friends and demonstrating this sisterhood and how sisterhood is so supportive.
Supportive, and I think a sacred space, right? A sacred space of connection. And so
it's a balm. It's a healing balm. So I think, people are always curious about who you are. Right? I know that I'm curious, and I know I've teased you for a long time because you've been this elusive kind of introvert to me, and we've known each other professionally. We knew each other professionally, I think, a couple of years before we ever sat down and had a conversation. Yeah.
Because you know how it is at work, right? Work is a little bit stiff. And I feel
a
like,
lot stiff.
I'm just saying, I feel like as Black folks, there's like a certain game that you try to play. And so, we would be vibing in the hallway like, I see you. But you're right. I think there were some unique circumstances that got generated that allowed us to shift the relationship from work to outside. And to me, the first place that began to happen was doing work for the people, right?
Yeah.
Being part of Black Caucus and really moving from thinking about social justice to applying it in multiple places in our lives. And so we're not going to get into all the details of that, but what was really important is that it began to give us opportunities to be clued into our lives in different ways.
Yeah, whenever I think about liberatory practices, I think about who am I connected to, what kind of conversations are we having, and what does it matter? That whole idea of mattering just became even more important when I started doing work for someone else and not just to pour into my own cup and fulfill myself. I think originally starting off as an educator, I really thought that there was a way of being that I had to demonstrate to everybody in and outside of the classroom, that I knew a lot, that I had a lot to share, that I was, smart enough. And, having a practice, I think I at times duplicated that persona. And it was working with you in community with you, building out how we wanted to be respected, reclaim, who we were as educators, to normalize just being Black women in the educational space and not make that something that was different from or separate from. I think that helped me develop even more of a passion to make sure that other people could join in on that conversation. It stopped being just about me. And I think it made it easier for me to connect with students. And I think it changes how my dialogue is seen when I'm with clients. Like now, all of a sudden, I'm having a conversation with an individual and I'm not, therapizing them. I'm developing a container for healing and for transformation. And it's not me facilitating their change.
Right.
Like those are some nuanced differences that I gained just from having a sister friend and developing community and having conversation with that.
Yeah. I think that's one of the gifts that come from relationships because it helps us to talk things out loud. We have someone to bounce things off of, right? And I think as educators, there's a certain way that you want to deliver information. And I think part of what I'm hearing you say, and I know part of what's been valuable in our relationship, is the fact that I'm not delivering something to you. I choose to share things with you, and in that process, you hold up the mirror, you help me see how I'm being reflected, you'll challenge me and invite me to think about something in a different kind of way, right? That I trust that you are rooting for me and rooting, and you have my best interest at heart. And so then I feel loved, I feel seen, I feel supported, and I genuinely, right, from like the depths of my heart, want to be able to reflect that back for you, right? That there's a shared well and a shared container that gets created, and that there's like just an effervescent love and care and joy and I don't know, like an honoring that's in the water. And I so appreciate being able to like share that with you and to know, like, listen, when you need to dump some things in this water, it's going to be here to support you and catch you. And when I need to dump things into the water, you know, I know that you're there to support me, right?
Yeah.
And so, again, around the personal stuff, I mean, we've been, you know, fighting for justice in multiple spaces together. We've been laughing and having coffee and eating well together, up and down these Chicago streets, okay? You know, she's been married successfully and happily married for a long time. And as a newlywed, I could come to her for feedback and for thoughts and for suggestions. And that's been such a gift. I think as educators, we're both committed to really figuring out how do we teach and train in a way that guide students to do work that we both find really meaningful and really important, and how to guide them and figure out who they are so that they can do this work well. Because ultimately, like we said before, what we're about is about healing for the people.
But I think we have one more thing. The real, I think, position we place ourselves in when we generate a community is we eliminate the isolation that sometimes comes with the work that we do. So as a therapist, everything you do is by yourself. You know, you're with clients by yourself, you're supervising by yourself, and unless you have a check-in process, a place where you could go and go, okay, how is it really going for you? Can you help me decipher how it's really going for me? I think I can get caught up in the belief system that I can have this linear understanding of what's happening and I can, you know, create change for people versus I really need to consult with you. It's best, it helps deliver like a reorganization of the way I'm thinking about something, but it also gives me an alternative thought. You also give me another way of, because there's not just one way. There's always multiple ways to think about something, to help a person generate change, to deliver healing. And I think, you know, this is a good place to just check in. How are you doing?
Exactly.
So I believe that there has to be a sister friend check-in. Like that has fundamentally, that has to be part of our process in this podcast. I think too often we don't check in. We don't check in with ourselves. We don't check in with our strong friends, right? So what does that mean to you when I say we need to have a sister friend check-in?
That means an opportunity to slow down, take a deep breath. You know, so many of us are breathing from up here, right? Like the top of the chest, versus really kind of coming all the way down to the diaphragm. Sing with the diaphragm. Where's Whoopi Goldberg? We need a little sister act moment in some ways, right? Like from the diaphragm. But really, in more seriousness, it means like an honest check-in around how are you really doing? What's really happening in your life? What do you really need? And there be room to move again from isolation to relationship and to community. And so it's a real question around what's going on for you. How are you doing? What do you need? Exhale. Full exhale.
Yeah. Okay. So let's start with the first question. When did you realize therapy just wasn't for other people, but you too could be in the space yourself?
That's an interesting question. When did I first realize it, or when did I first utilize it in some ways, right? Because those are two different things. So, I think that there was a process of like testing the waters, right? And so I think growing up, I think, you know, you go to your guidance counselor and you kind of go, you know, my friends are not talking to me. So when such stuff is happening, I'll be real honest. We can talk about this another day. But I'm someone that got bullied in school, so significantly bullied, and adults did not do what they should have done to create safety and protection.
Wow.
So we can talk about that another day.
Yeah, for sure. That's a check-in.
Some major things, right? But you go to your guidance counselor, or you have a teacher that cares about you and is really asking that question in a real way. I think stepping into that was when I was able to recognize that even though I was uncomfortable being vulnerable, that there's power in vulnerability, that there are gifts in vulnerability, that there are lessons to learn in vulnerability. And so I think it was recognizing that my vulnerability wasn't a weakness, but that there is a lot to be learned in vulnerability. And so I think that's when I first really decided, like, I can figure this out. I can be curious about myself. And not just I can be curious about myself, I have a right and a duty and a responsibility to be curious about myself and to grow.
That makes sense.
What about for you? When you think about this question and your own right to sort of claim a therapeutic healing for yourself,
What's so funny is immediately I thought about being in that box with the priest on the other side of it.
Really?
And having my first conversations around, what I had done wrong. So for me, therapy just felt like an opportunity to be penalized. So I stayed away from it. Even as a therapist originally, I thought, oh no, if I'm a therapist, I don't need therapy. Like, that's why I'm a therapist. And then I recognized how much power there is in talking about what is happening in my life and how I'm feeling, and having someone be available just to hear it without attempting to change it, offer suggestions around it, have me feel or experience it in any other way than the original experience. And like you said, I really appreciated this idea of slowing down, because I think that's the first time I learned how to slow down, was when I was in therapy. But when I realized that therapy was for me, was the mandatory, once upon a time in the clinical mental health counseling program, it was mandatory to go to therapy.
I think it should
for a period of time.
I think it should be.
Yeah, we've eliminated that for whatever reason. But when it was mandatory, I went and I really got something from it. It felt like an innocuous conversation. And I recognized that sometimes in that, I can see all the ways that I'm repeating things that I believe in my head when I'm by myself have disappeared, like I've grown out of. When in actuality, there's so many things that are rooted in shame, pain,
trauma.
Trauma, the big T, that it wouldn't change unless I was able to see it, and I can't see it unless I talk about it.
Yeah. And just to be clear, I wasn't even throwing the trauma word on you. Just what was coming up for me in some ways, right? Like our personal experiences, but then also as Black folks, our community experiences, right?
Yes.
Like cultural traumas that we still carry, generational legacies that still impact how we move and the decisions that we make, right? And the ways we can get stuck in survival mode
without a doubt
of healing. And so I appreciate you naming that, right?
Yeah.
Because there are lots of ways that folks can get introduced to therapeutic-like healing spaces and feel really good about them, and I think we need them. And there's also a critical difference between those spaces and what therapy is also. And that might be for a future podcast episode, right? Because we don't only believe that healing can only happen in therapy. It's just that therapy is a healing space. It is a resource. It's not the only one, and it's not the only one that we use. And so I think that that's important.
I think we've laid the groundwork. We've built the foundation. Okay. So we've talked a lot about watch your mouth.
Yeah.
And what it means for both of us. We've, talked a little bit about us, not a lot. And, that's coming. What else is coming?
Well, I think we probably should share with you all what this podcast is going to look like. We've got a couple of different interesting segments that are going to be coming up and that we're going to need your help with. So one of the fun ones that we're excited about is we're going to talk a little bit about pop culture, healing, and therapy. There's a lot of stuff that's going on. And so by pop culture, obviously we don't just mean celebrity drama, because there will be a little bit of that, but it's more than that. But just things that are just happening community-wise that we need to talk about.
And how that impacts our mental health. One of the things that we want to make sure in our raw and real dialogue is the merger between how these outside things impact therapy, but how they also impact the therapist.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. How they're impacting our lives, right? Yeah. Our regular lives, our therapeutic selves, how we show up. And so we gotta talk about what's out there in the ether.
I like that.
It's real.
It is real. It is real. Because it's not just your bubble that you create with your client. Think about COVID.
Mm-hmm.
Nobody could escape that. Like nobody. Like in our lives, this was the very first time that I shared or co-shared and co-created meaning around what was going on in the world with clients.
Absolutely. It was such a random thing. And I don't say this to toot my own horn, but I'm just going to say this little thing. I was interviewed by some folks for the New York Times, right? Talking about this process. But to me, that was like one of the hardest things as a therapist in COVID, right? Is that, we were responsible for holding space for clients. And let's be honest, our clients were folks who were working from home, so many of them for the first time ever. We had all kinds of first responders. We had all kinds of folks who were, I forgot what the term was that they were calling it, folks that had to work outside the home. Frontline folks, right? Yeah. But one of the significant things about that was that as a therapist, it was one of the times in which you are experiencing the exact same thing that your client is experiencing in real time. And that doesn't always happen, right? If I have clients who are getting a divorce, I'm not getting a divorce. So I'm able to sort of separate out my own personal things that are happening from what's going on with my client, right? My client is struggling with their kid. They're trying to figure out, how do I support them while figuring out how to also provide them with healthy correction. I don't have any children, so I don't have that problem in my house at the exact same moment. But COVID was different. And so part of what we're wanting to do with this podcast, right, is to peel back some of the layers, talk about what happens for therapists on the backside of things, and share that in a way that's helpful to you all. Some of you who want to become therapists, some of you who are therapists, but some of you who are just nosy about what goes on in the process. And we support the nosiness, right?
Yeah, because we all want to know. That's why we're in this field.
Hello.
We want to know.
I'm curious.
Tell us more. The infamous statement. Tell me more. So I think within that, and we can't escape it, is politics.
Yes.
Like part of pop culture now is politics. We're in the land of sensationalism and
a 24-hour news cycle. CNN that's not just about providing us with the information, but also entertaining us.
Yeah.
But the truth of the matter is that we've always lived in a political world. We just didn't always talk about it.
True.
Which is also why other countries used to talk about us.
Right.
Like, why do y'all pretend like you're not political when we are?
And I think because of all these platforms that we're on now, it's definitely going to be spoken about. And I think with this podcast, Watch Your Mouth, is really about advocacy. It's not just about the sensationalism. It's not just about the politics or pop culture and how that invades the space of mental health, but it's about advocacy. How do we advocate for ourselves, for our communities, and for each other?
Yeah, I really appreciate you saying that.
Yeah.
And I'll just drop this little tidbit because I know we're coming back, but lots of folks assume that therapists are neutral, and I just want to throw out there that I don't think it's actually humanly possible to be unbiased or to be neutral. And so what I hope to do is be transparent about what I believe and where I stand, so that you know how I'm viewing the world, and we figure out whether we align or whether we share it. But am I neutral? I don't even know what neutrality is.
I think neutrality is this position that you can hold when you have privilege to not care about or be invested in, everything that's happening. So if I have clean water, I'm not invested in, if I'm not an advocate, I'm not invested in, places like Michigan or places like, the Congo that, you know, are really trying to figure out the water situation. So if I'm neutral about it, I'm not invested. And I think this is a podcast where we are invested.
100%.
So we will have some disagreements.
Of course.
And we will stand on our side and, you know, learn how to critically analyze, you know, what that means in a therapeutic space. You know, as clients, but also as therapists.
Absolutely.
And I think with that, we'll definitely have to invite some people in.
We have to talk to other people.
Yeah,
Because,
we
could talk amongst ourselves
Michelle,
forever.
Give us a call. We definitely, you or your brother, like we could definitely have you on this space. That would be fantastic. You know, she's still my first lady.
Of
I'm
course.
just saying.
Forever first.
Forever.
Okay, forever first. But no, we have to have folks that are going to come on here, they're going to join us, that have great questions that they're going to ask you, great questions they're going to ask us. But because we are nosy and we're therapists, you know, we're going to come with all the good questions.
Tell me more
to
about
kind
that.
of pull in and get in the weeds. But ultimately, what we want to do is figure out how we can be, again, a container of information and knowledge that supports all of our well-being, all of our healthiness.
And don't forget about the sisterhood check-in.
Oh, yep, we're gonna
have a check-in. We have to ask each other questions that, you know, basically you may have asked someone, or that you really want to make sure is part of the dialogue. I think it's important that we have a check-in because we don't do that enough for ourselves or for other people. I think that's the simplest answer.
That's right.
We don't do it enough, and we got to make sure that's included.
Exactly. So hopefully you have questions for us.
Yeah.
We definitely have questions for you. And
definitely.
That's literally what we do for a living.
Definitely.
And so we can do this together, and we can share and grow and learn from each other.
Yeah, and have those real raw dialogues about healing. Yeah. So I am really, really interested in what's going to be happening. That makes me even curious about what's going to be happening next episode.
What's happening next episode?
Next episode.
What's next episode?
It's going to be so juicy. It really is about unpacking these myths that surround therapy. Okay. Yeah, I'm sure we all have therapy myths.
Of course.
Yeah, we want to talk about them, and we want to talk about how we can change them.
That's right. So hopefully you'll share some with us so that we can bring them up. We can talk about them, and there might be some bubbles that still need to get popped.
I like that.
Some of us might still believe some of these things, and we're gonna bring you the information that you need. We'll see you next time.